Yo.
Hey.
I think you guys are a little sideways, sitting sideways.
How we
Y'all joint sideways, horizontal.
Oh, got it.
Boom.
There we go.
Okay.
What's
What
up?
up, y'all?
Hi.
Got a little visitor today.
I see that she's gonna be speaking to, dropping some gems.
Dropping
Yeah.
all the knowledge.
Giving her limited perspective on marriage.
Oh.
Man, we're super excited to be kicking it with y'all tonight. This is gonna be just straight free-flowing conversation. So first off, I guess just how has y'all's day been leading up to this?
Day has been good. Yeah, our days are busy, but I would say today's been good.
Yeah, chill day, bro. At least I try to make my Fridays as chill as possible.
Right.
But yeah, no.
Yeah. What about y'all?
Busy.
Yes, it's been super busy this week. Very productive, I must say, because there's a difference between busyness and productiveness. So, I mean, but Fridays is good. I'm just so happy it's a weekend. But yeah, I was really looking forward to this and just can't wait to, just hear all the gems y'all got. So what we're going to do first is let's just tell the people who we are, what we're about, just a little bit about us. So we can just start. Of course, we are the Hamiltons. I am Dania Hamilton, originally from Fort Washington, Maryland. And I run our business, So and Tell. I focus on brand strategy and development in social media. And so I've been doing that full time since last November. And it's just been really, really just a great thing to do because it was a faith move. And now I live in New York. I've been living here for 2 years, and I've been married to this handsome fellow. So go ahead and talk about yourself, babe.
So, I'm this beautiful woman's husband, Cellus Hamilton, originally from Atlanta, living in New York City now, and I'm a hip hop artist. Been doing hip hop pretty much my whole life, and so it's a privilege to be able to co-found our business So and Tell together. I do a lot of the music side, and just be able to share our heart for God through our skills. So that's a little bit about us. We've been married for a year and a half, and it's just been, which we're going to talk about, journey.
It's been a journey.
So, yeah.
Hey, Marty. Yeah, that's us.
Heard that. You can start off there.
So I'm Jessica. Evan and I are both from Memphis. We lived in Chicago for a few years before moving back last year.
Jessica Stevens.
Jessica Stevens.
Stevens. Can't leave that out. There's a lot of Jessicas out there.
So I taught for a few years, and when our oldest, he's 2.5, when he was born, I decided to be a full-time mom, and I started blogging at ponderedthought.com. So anybody's on to check it out. And then we had Ada. She's right here. She's 3 months, and we didn't want anybody to be babysitting. You'll see her Virgo. I was trying to get her to sleep, but she decided to wake up. And yeah, I finished writing a book that's coming out officially on Monday, and it is called God in My Pondered Thought. And so yeah, that's just been a labor of love, and it's available on Amazon for anybody who wants to check it out. It's about my experience when I was at Princeton.
That's huge. Congrats.
Yeah, and funny thing, that's the humble, modest version. She is beyond brilliant, beyond gorgeous, as you all can see, and quite frankly, one of the most gifted writers, hands down. Like, I remember back when we were 16 years old, bro. I would read her papers and be so insecure. I was like, "You wrote that?" Like, I don't know. She's super gifted, bro. Background on me. So as she mentioned, I'm also a native of Memphis, Tennessee as well. Went to Howard University, studied finance. Been in banking, finance industry the last, 6 years, since 2014, and recently transitioned to wealth management. So that's a pretty brief synopsis of us. But we super excited to be here, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, essentially being the catalyst to get this going. I know it's long overdue.
And it's such an awesome
Long overdue, yo.
Yeah, it's a juicy topic. So I can't wait to get started. And you guys have been married for how long again?
About 5.5 years.
5.5
5.5
years.
years.
Praise God.
5.5 years. We've actually dated since we were 16, though.
Aw.
So we've been in the game.
Teenage love.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the official IG Live with Tour Life and the Stevens family. We're so excited to have y'all here. Feel free to go ahead and chat where you guys are from, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So let's talk about the title of this IG Live, right? It's marriage, and then underneath we talk about the expectations versus the reality, right? Because I feel like before we get into marriage, we all have that perspective of marriage. We all have the expectations of what it's going to be like, all of those things. And so I want to go ahead and just open it up for us. What were your expectations before you got married about marriage?
You go first.
No, I don't mind. I didn't have, so this is honest to God, I didn't have super high expectations going into marriage, in the sense where I didn't have this laundry list of like what my marriage is supposed to be. In fact, so first of all, let's take you down memory lane. We graduated from Howard. Well, I graduated from Howard 2014, right? I had no plans whatsoever of proposing as soon as I did. Long story short, after conversation, after praying, talking to a few mentors, I decided, hey, I was going to go ahead and propose. Because literally the story is I was at Navy Pier in Chicago, Illinois, and I was having lunch with my parents. And I was just joking around. I just kind of threw it out there. I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to propose to Jessica next week. I promise you, 100% joking. I kid you not. And my parents took it so seriously that I'm like, okay. And the whole conversation just kind of spiraled from there. As a result, my dad was like, hey, man, it's about that time. So I was like, okay. So I prayed about it some more and decided to make that decision. I share that because, again, I literally was not planning on proposing, which I ended up proposing that New Year's Eve of 2014.
Hey, honestly, y'all, I wish the story was like, I could not wait to graduate
I know.
from college, propose to her, I've been wanting to marry her, the moment I got, not the story of, I was completely joking, and hey, you took it seriously.
Right. But no, so I share that because some of the guys at the church, I was fortunate at Progressive in Chicago to be around a lot of like guys who were super serious about marriage, young guys building their families, guys I was planning on proposing, they kind of like took me under their wing, man. Like, so I kind of locked in to 5 months prior to proposing. And they kind of brought me in and did life with me, man. Showed me like literally what this whole marriage thing is about. And they kind of gave me a really sober reality. Like all the stuff you see on TV or what you heard, like, nah, bro, this the big leagues. It's not for the faint of heart. Like you gotta man up. Like this ain't something to play around with. And so I say all that to say my expectations kind of were really on par with what I've experienced for the most part, which is it takes a lot of work to create a successful marriage, and it's going to be a lot of suffering, a lot of endurance, a lot of growth, a lot of transparency, the whole nine.
So you came in there with the sober thoughts.
Right. You was prepared, low key. Like, dang. You gonna get suffering?
I know. I was skeptical to use the word suffering. I don't want to scare nobody away, but like, hey,
no, it's gonna be some suffering, all right. No, he was right. Yeah. Yes, there will be a replay. Yes, we will be posting that, Bree. But okay, that was really, really good. Thank you for sharing.
What about you?
Yeah. So I think for me, I knew like I had heard marriage was going to be hard. I had an expectation for what like the first year of marriage was going to be like. And I wrote about this like on the post one time, and I just really thought with us being in Chicago, like our weekends were going to be filled with just amazing dates, us taking buses into the city, walking the streets on Michigan Avenue, going to different cafes.
When did you know that?
We did some of it.
I thought we did a few of those.
Some of it, not like arguing, but like whatever. I really thought that with us being dating for so long that wouldn't be that hard. And marriage is just completely different from dating. It's just two different ballparks, and I don't think I was like really prepared for the fact that like marriage is such a glorious thing, and that it's such part of God's establishment that Satan comes after you the moment you get married.
Right.
It's like he hates marriage completely, and so I don't think I really took that into consideration. Like, wow, this is not just about love and like, you know, a man loving a woman, a woman loving a man. Like literally, this is a union to God, and it brings so much glory to the Lord that someone actually hates it and it will do whatever everything possible to separate you.
Are you preaching?
So that was like expectation versus reality.
Right.
What about for y'all though, man?
So for me personally, I wasn't raised in the church. I actually became a Christian later on in life, around 19. So when I always thought, you know, I would get married one day, but it really wasn't like my, you know, like a goal for me. Like, oh, I'm going to be married by 25 and have all these children, because I didn't know God and I didn't really know like the purpose of marriage, right? I was just like, okay, this is just something that people do when they get older, right? Like I didn't really understand the depths of it at all. But when I became a Christian, I was like, okay, this is something that God has ordained, and this is something beautiful. This is something that He desires for me, for, you know, for people to do, if that's their will, if that's His will for their lives. And so now having like my perspective shifted, right? And so expectations, I just expected it to be honestly like super fun all the time, and just expected it to be like kind of like you, right? Like, so yeah, we'll have like little arguments here and there, but we're Christians, so we're gonna get over it. Like it's gonna be fine, right? Like we're gonna work through our problems just so quickly, and that's it. But yeah, and then also my perspective of marriage was kind of an unhealthy one, to be honest, because I am a product of divorced parents. And so, you know, I love my mom, love my dad, and just things happen. And so I really didn't see what a healthy marriage looked like, at the same time. But I desired that, right? But I just didn't expect the work that went in it, right? Because there's some work, y'all. Like you said, there's some suffering, bro. Like there's some suffering that happens. So that was my expectation. Like I was like, oh, it's not gonna be too bad. Like we're Christians. Like we know the Lord, so you know it's gonna be fine. But then reality hit. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But what about you, babe?
So So I expected marriage to be. I knew it was gonna be tough. I grew up seeing my parents, you know what I'm saying, go through their arguments, go through their stuff, and work it out and get back good, and go through stuff and get back good. So my mindset was like, this is what marriage is you fight, you go through stuff, you get back good. And I think in a way, when you go into something so strong, thinking you know exactly how tough it's going to be, you actually set yourself up for some failure. So I kind of came in like, it's going to be hard, but shoot, it ain't going to be that hard when we came. And then it's like, I'm going into stuff with this extra confidence, and then digging in it, and we start going through stuff, and I'm like, I didn't know what hard felt like. I just was observing hard. And so I think my expectations have been, they've been something that's humbled me and let me realize like, yo, you don't know what somebody else is going through until you're actually in it. So it's been extremely humbling for me, for my expectations.
Yeah, for sure.
So what exactly, like, if we were to really say more concretely, what about marriage specifically was different than what we expected?
So specifically, I'll say, okay, so this goes exactly to what I was sharing before about me going into it with this confidence. One of the things specifically that I thought was going to be really, really easy was the way we viewed conflict. I immediately thought that if we had a problem and I thought it's not a big deal, she's going to think it's not a big deal. Like, it could still be a problem. We could still be navigating through it, disagreeing, But if at the end of the conflict, I'm able to walk into the other room and like, we good, in my mind, thinking she automatically is going to feel that way, not knowing that what I'm saying we're good about, she's in the other room thinking, oh my gosh, this is destroying us, this is it. And so that, your whole perspective on one issue, literally makes conflict, because you both see the same thing completely differently. And so that's just one example I have.
Yeah.
That's good.
I totally agree. Like going in, I didn't really expect things to surface up in me, right? Like, you know, I went to counseling before I got married, right? Did the individual counseling, all of that. And I was like, okay, I got some junk. I got some mess, but I'm in the healing process, praise God. But then there are certain things that honestly won't surface up until you're married, you know, like, because you're living with somebody. You know, I've never lived with, you know, a man before, and who happens to be my husband, right? And he's a mirror. He's like a walking mirror, and just showing me the good, bad, and ugly. Like, let's keep it real, right? And so I realized that I had issues that I didn't even know, that I didn't even see. But I thank God for that, because it's like, okay, yes, I'm annoyed with all the things that you're showing me about myself, but I'm also grateful at the same time, because it helps me to be more like Christ, because to be aware, and how beautiful it is that, yo, this man sees me up close, you know, all the time, and is like, but I love you unconditionally, despite the mess that you have. And it reminds me so much of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was the reality for me coming in, and then also just appreciating each other's differences. So as y'all see, we're also culturally different. I was born and raised though in Maryland. I'm very Americanized, but I am Filipino. My family is from the Philippines. And so that was a huge thing, like coming in and just navigating through our differences. And, you know, me from Maryland, him from Atlanta, that's another thing too. Like, that's two different cultures as well.
The whole way we see the world, right, is different.
So like, yes, I would always joke about this. I would be like, y'all, the only thing we have in common is that we know and believe that Jesus is Lord. Like, legit. That's it. Like, I would tell people we were the most incompatible people to get married. But that's true. Like, that's God. Like, he literally made it happen. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I would say.
What were some of those for y'all, like those examples of the things that you just went against what you expected?
I didn't know, like, you know, so before marriage, there are moments when I felt alone, especially with us being long distance. There were just like lonely parts. So it's like, man, I just can't wait till we're married and we're always together. And I did not know that in marriage you can feel alone.
Yes.
That there will be moments when you feel lonely, and it's not the physical presence. And I think that's what pushes more towards Christ, is that one, just the differences in a male and a female become a lot more evident in marriage.
So true.
Even as a woman, I can only speak for myself. You're constantly evolving, you know, when you are on your menstrual cycle, or when you become pregnant, or when you have children, things start changing. And then you look at your husband, you're like, wow, we are so different. And in those moments when you really can't put words into how you're feeling, loneliness can seep in, and that's what drives you to God, Jesus. Really, I'm just like, Lord,
right?
I feel so alone.
Wow.
And I think that's the beautiful part of sanctification. It's because I never knew that when I was single. I never thought that in marriage you could feel alone, and in marriage that loneliness could drive you to Christ.
Wow, that's so good. Thank you for sharing that.
That's good.
Yeah. For me, man, it's just trying to be an effective leader in the house. It's like, it's not a switch you can turn off. You know what I'm saying? It's not some electronic device. It doesn't run out. It's like leadership from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. Like there's a spiritual just weight to effectively being Christ in your home. That means loving her, serving her, sacrificing for her. You know what I'm saying? All the time, right? And it's interesting, man. And so many times we get in conflicts or disagreements, or I mean, we're just really annoyed with each other. Whatever the case could be, God always taps me, man. He's like, look, that's your responsibility.
Right.
That's what I've called you to do.
Dang.
And it's a weight to it, man. It's like, God, like, again, like, serve some more, sacrifice some more. But you know, clearly I laid out before, you know, she did X, Y, and Z. Man up and go love your wife and be like me to her. And I've seen, man, just in those moments where he gives me the grace to like go sacrifice and go just be the leader and at that particular juncture, there's his presence, man, is just so like thick in the sense of like I can tell that she's able to see him clearly through those like moments of adversity. So yeah, I would say that it's just a leadership doesn't stop, man.
Yo, I think what's so true about that, when you said like it's not a switch that you can turn off, like, bro, I resonate with that, and that makes me think about, we particularly see that with, so for us, we both recognize that because, and you actually talked to me about, we're brothers and we talk all the time on our bro calls, and one thing you said that we wrestle with all the time is the idea that no matter what home we grew up in, our parents all had different dysfunctions.
Right.
They all had different things that we grew up seeing and that we thought was the right way, but we realized in marriage that, wow, this is the way that I've been taught to see the world, or this is the way that I've been taught to respond in conflict. And it's not always the healthiest way. Like, what are some of those dysfunctions that you guys have recognized that you're fighting against specifically?
So good.
Yeah. I think the first. At first, I'm glad you mentioned that point because that's true. I think the soonest people reconcile that, hey, our parents are broken, I think you're much more alert of the dysfunction that that you naturally inherited. I think for me, let me first start off by saying I had phenomenal parents, right? I mean, I couldn't have asked for better parents. I think one area where I think I did inherit a certain way of communication, like whenever we get really angry with each other, I feel like there's better ways they could have communicated with each other. And it's interesting because naturally I would look at that and say, I would talk to others and they're like, oh yeah, my parents do that as well. And so I digested that and I normalized it, right? I'm like, okay, it's okay if you're that angry, you can talk like that. Or it's kind of like you get this like pass to say certain things predicated upon the situation, right? Yeah. When and the reality is, Holy Spirit convicted me on that, and He practically began to show me like, no. It's not a matter of you arguing, but you're supposed to honor me with the nature in which y'all have discourse, right? You can still love her, serve her, and be respectful, right? While y'all have intense discussions. And so practically what that looks like for us, we had to create like some general rules of engagement when we have like, I guess, disagreements. One, like no name calling. We don't use absolutes like never or absolute like you always do this or you never do that. Yeah. And then 3, we're always praying that when those times of conflict come, that if one of us isn't in the headspace, so we can see if one of us is really in our flesh, where that person just trying to pick a fight, you gotta kind of call it out and be like, look, like she called me out, I call her, like, all right, man, you trying to go there? You're not about to do that. Right. We can circle back in 30 minutes, to an hour, you know what I'm saying, but you're not about to do that. And so. Yeah, and then that's the thing, man. And y'all she mentioned something earlier about like spiritual warfare, like this whole marriage piece. Like Satan not playing no games. Like he bringing out his 18 to do whatever he can to divide the two, right? And so literally, we were teaching a marriage class earlier this month, and bro, literally all hell broke loose like we doing well, but like all these attacks, we get into it about this, about that. We like, whoa, where does this even come from? And it all started from the time we signed up to start teaching that class, bro.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest thing for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like just that spiritual discipline of just praying, like praying in the morning right before Evan leaves, praying at night right before we go to bed.
Yes.
Anytime we're in an argument, we're like, let's just stop and pray, and then we can discuss. Yeah.
And so I want to add one other thing to that, because that's so important, bro. There have been so many times where we'll be going back and forth, and we feel like we've exhausted all of the logical points, right? Well, we like, dang, we really can't move past this. We'll literally pray about something, come back, and like literally get past it in a minute or so. Yeah. It's weird, bro. It's like
that's it.
That culture of prayer, bro, is like huge.
Yes, so important. So important. It's not our battle.
That's something we've learned for sure. And the power of prayer, like literally making Jesus the center of our marriage, when we're sitting here realizing like we could be fighting about one thing, but just knowing like, number one, and she's queen at reminding me of this and saying, we're on the same team. If we get in a disagreement and it seems like I'm focusing so much on the problem that I'm getting emotional about it, or I'm getting like really intense about it, she's just, babe, we're on the same team. We're on the same team. The same way you're trying to figure this out, I'm trying to figure this out.
Yes.
I don't want to be dealing with this same thing the same you don't. So we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And I think one of the dysfunctions that I've been it goes hand in hand, like communication. I've learned, which is something I had to recognize about myself. My wife needs, when she asks a question, one of the ways that I can show love to her is by not only acknowledging her question, but legit giving her my attention when I answer it. And so I recognize that one of the things that I did that I didn't realize was something that I thought was okay until she called me out on it. Because one day she literally was like, you notice that sometimes I ask you a question and you won't say anything and you'll just continue doing what you're doing like you don't hear me. And she's like, but I know you heard me. And I was just thinking like, dang. And we were in this season where we were going through counseling, learning about our upbringing and things we saw. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize it at the time, but that's something that I adopted. And she was letting me know that's not okay. Even if you feel like my question is something that I know the answer to, or whatever is your reason, I need to be acknowledged. I need to be spoken to. And it's just like, wow, I need to retrain myself to acknowledge you and to respond to you, even if it's something that I feel like is small. So I can really relate to that on the dysfunctional level for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. For me, a big thing, when getting into marriage, I didn't realize that even though I was a Christian, I had this lie in my head that I had to cast down, right? I thought, even though I would never say it, or like, I would never say it or own up to it, I always, for me, I guess going into it, I never realized the stronghold that I had, which was the mindset of divorce was an option. And that was a lie from the enemy. Obviously, I didn't claim that. It's just so crazy how spiritual this is, right?
Yeah.
And so there would just be times when we'd had rough nights and arguments and everything, and I knew it was like a lie from the enemy, because that's not something that obviously I would think of on my own, or I'm a Christian, right? And so, but I would just think like, this is it. Like, nah, I can't do this, or like, or like, I'm not even fit for this. Like, I remember when I would say that, maybe I'm not fit for marriage, right? Like, especially with the things that, like, the where I came from and just the background that I've had. And those are literally lies that I had to cast down, and we had to pray together about, about that. So that was a huge thing that I would say was a dysfunctional mindset coming into marriage.
Absolutely.
I think like also culture, because I want to answer this question from culture, because I really felt having a husband, that love was just going to be it's going to sustain me for life. Like his love for me, his desire for me. That's what I need. And that's what is always going to be there 24/7.
Right.
And for whatever reason, when I was
What
okay.
you trying to say about my love? No, I'm just.
And yeah, for whatever reason, when I was little and I looked at other married women, I was like, you're desirable. That's what I would see. It was like, oh my gosh, I want that because you're desired. And so when I got married, man, the insecurity that I had in Christ for his love transferred to my husband. Wow. So it'd be like in the middle of the night, sometimes I would wake up and I'm like, do you love me?
Hey, listen.
No, I thought I was the only one.
Listen.
Are you sure? Yesterday. Oh, but it just doesn't seem like you love me anymore.
and just as a husband who has failed at that, in my responses, that is, listen, that's a part of that sacrificial love, meaning like my love for her is not predicated upon me illogically making sense to me. If like the Holy Spirit will show you exactly how to love her in that moment, and sometimes I'll be stuck on understanding and logic. No, just go ahead, bro. Like, love her. Like, answer that. Yes. Yes is the answer to that question.
And so, really, honestly,
because our mind be wanting the logic. Yeah.
And I was just saying, the first 2 years, it was that. And until the Lord had to say, Jessica, don't forget your first love. Right? And that was so beautiful when I was able to recognize that. Man, Lord,
so good.
Like the church, the letter to the church. In Revelation, and he writes to this church and he says, you've done all of these things, and he commends them. He says, good, basically, great job. But he says, one thing I have against you, you've forgotten your first love.
Right.
And I think that's the case for so many of us women.
Oh, it's so true. And you know, it is possible to idolize your marriage.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because that's some of the things that I had to cast down too. I was like, you know, you're supposed to feel, I remember when I would say that, like, you're supposed to fulfill me. You're supposed to love me. What are you doing? Like, I know we're in a disagreement right now, but you have a commitment to me. And it's like, God really had to rewire my thinking. It's like, no, you're actually idolizing your husband. You're actually idolizing your marriage. You're putting him in the place where I belong. And that's a lot of pressure for our spouses. You know what I mean?
And Daniel, that's such a good point, because just in full transparency, it works both ways too. When you mentioned that point, there was a period of time in my marriage where I was just so used to finding my value in my wife's approval. Like, it was literally wrapped up in it. Like, I was doing all these things, but if she didn't give me a certain response based on what I was doing for her, I was like, man, maybe I'm missing it in this area. Maybe I'm not doing this. Maybe I'm not doing that. The Lord had to check me on that as well. Like, my wife ain't Jesus. She just as I mean, as beautiful as you are, my wife ain't Jesus. And with that being the case, like, I literally had to reposition my focus on Christ in that particular area.
That's so good, man. That's so good. And I think that's been something. So we did a podcast episode about how we realized how the church has also, in a way, pushed this narrative sometimes that marriage is the only way you can feel valued and intimate. And we wanted to cast that down because we realized that the church often hasn't been vocal enough to say the most intimate man who ever lived, Jesus, wasn't married. And so when we often push this narrative to our single family members and say, hey, your ultimate goal in life is to get married so that you can feel loved and valued and successful, we're ultimately selling them a lie that says Jesus isn't enough. And it's been something we've had to reevaluate.
We have to repent ourselves.
We've had to repent. We've had to repent to a lot of our single friends for unknowingly speaking that rhetoric and
putting marriage on a pedestal.
Putting marriage on a pedestal. And at the same time, I think it's also given us a challenge in a way as well to fully see how much we really need God, because even with this thing that he's really entrusted us with marriage. He's entrusted us to use this thing that he's given us to represent him and his love and commitment to us. So when we say that, when I tell my wife, hey, I'll never leave you, hey, I'm committed to you, hey, I'll make sure that whatever you need, I'll take care of you, I'm doing to her what I know and first have received from Jesus. Like what God first tells me, he's promised to me that he'll never leave me nor forsake me, that he loves me, that he'll take care of my needs. Like I can only give that to her when I first really know I've got it from God and believe that I've got it from him. Yeah. And so I just realized how much that funnel, because when I'm not seeing God correctly, I definitely don't see my wife correctly. I don't speak to her correctly. I don't respect her correctly. I don't love her, serve her. And so it's all of that funnel.
Wow.
I wanted to ask you guys, how has marriage benefited you in this season? How has marriage kind of helped you?
Yeah.
That's a great question.
I'm gonna show you.
You got it.
For me, man, I'll speak generally. I think one of the dopest parts about marriage is I'm thinking about like Genesis, how the Bible, like in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed. And what that verse kind of alludes to, there's a depth to transparency and intimacy that you have with a person. When you are naked and unashamed, like no secrets. I think it's just a unique space where a person can truly grow when she knows your fears, your concerns, your insecurities, your struggles, your greatest visions and purposes. It's a unique space, man. It's a trusted and a sacred space that you have in marriage. And also, let me add on something to that. There's a space of accountability as well, right? Because essentially in marriage, when we operate as being naked and unashamed, your wife, or at least my wife, she sees my blind spots, right? She has an objective view of things I can't see about myself.
Yep.
And as a result of that, I've learned to value that, because I thought I was better than what I was.
Ooh.
Right? Like there was just so many times I was like, wow, babe, I've been leading like this, I've been doing X, Y, and Z, and she'll come and lay it out. And like she's like a whole PowerPoint presentation. I mean, notepad, like, well, actually you're doing X, Y, and Z.
Right. Wow.
And this early in our marriage, that was problematic for me, because I was almost denying her objective reality, right? Like, I know way. But as God kind of matured me in that, to like see that no, and I guess to your point earlier, that we're on the same side.
Yeah.
And like listen up, dummy. Like, no, she's there to help you get to where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
And same vice versa, right?
Yeah.
And so when I started to not only see our differences as problematic, right, but as unique, like elevators, right, to help us be better, like it changed my whole reality, right? Every difference I look at, but I literally don't no longer see it as it being problematic anymore.
Wow.
So
I just want to add on to that. I did not know that it was going to be so cool to see growth in marriage. I just didn't know that. So like when we were marriage, you're always going through something or growing in an area. But when you can entrust a problem to the Lord and, keep trying to be like Christ in it. Because sometimes you're like, I'm being like Christ, I'm praying, and there's nothing happening. It's just so discouraging. Right. But man, when you really sow those seeds, they do grow. It's not in vain. And I have one example to share. When Ada was born, well, actually, when Evan Jr. was born, he's 2.5. That's our son. That was just a rough time. Like we probably got in our worst argument probably within the first 2 weeks of his life because we were sleep deprived. It was just hard.
Bro, that's the worst.
Right. And we were like, But when Ada was born, this is what I'm talking about, growth. When Ada was born, we were both very sleep deprived. And I think, Evan, we were both up and like our breath smelled awful. And so I was like telling him, your breath smells, like speak in that direction. He's like, my breath smells, your breath smells. He's talking over there. We're talking like and in the middle of it, we looked at each other.
Let's get this Listerine before we continue this conversation.
And in the middle of that, we looked at each other and laughed. Like, we laughed and then we kissed. It was just like, we're sleep deprived. We're sleep deprived. We'll just talk about it in the morning.
Hey, what's stinking breath? That's
that would not have happened a couple years ago. That's growth. And I love saying that. I love saying that.
Wow.
No, this would not have happened first year of marriage. And to celebrate the growth.
Yeah, for real, bro.
We often forget to celebrate the victories too. And I think that's part of the ways of like walking in that growth is like when we recognize, when we have those moments where we're like, whoa, we used to do this. We used to respond this way. When we recognize that no longer we're doing that, that's a powerful moment to just be grateful and thank God for where he's brought us. And so what do you think, Abe, as far as like a way that this has benefited you?
Being married to you has benefited me. Wow. So good. We were kind of talking about that earlier, and I feel like, you know, we serve a God who cares about like the whole us, right? So of course he's a spiritual God, but he also made us physical beings, emotional beings, have mental health and all of those things. And so I feel like honestly marriage has just made me a better person. And I know that's so cliche and it's in all the like little R&B love songs, but I'm serious, right? And so like I love how now that like going into marriage, every decision that I make, whether it's a financial decision or, you know, another decision as a unit, everything impacts my husband. And so it's no longer me thinking about myself. It's like, no, when God calls us together, it's two becoming one. So everything that I do, like, it affects him, even if he wasn't involved. Like, that's just the nature of marriage. You know what I mean? And so one of the things that like you said, Evan, like the whole accountability piece is so huge. Like, you know, checking on each other. Have you prayed yet? Like, when's the last time you fasted? Or even when we don't want to get up, even the physical things. Like, even when we don't want to get up at 7:30 to go for our run, it's like, yeah. And so I love how I have this forever accountability partner that's always checking in on me and wants me to be more like Christ. Like, that's the thing. And with that, there comes challenges, because there are things that I don't want to accept about myself. But my husband is like, no, like you said, Evan, like, no, like this is something that you do, and this is something that you got to really like cast down or be intentional with prayer with God about it. And so that's how I feel like I benefit.
Yeah. The love of love is real, bro.
It is. It is. I kind of like what she said earlier. So, as you guys know, we're so different, and I think that's one of the things that has also like it's grown me in so many ways, because specifically now I'm able to go into a situation that I always saw one way. I always saw the world from my one lens, and now I find myself going to situations. So I'll give you a plain example. I always have been an extremely truthful, straightforward, like, say what it is, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes it's at the expense of others' emotions and feelings about what I say. That was just my code. It was like, hey, if I don't like something, I'm going to say it right then and there. I'm not going to be fake. I'm going to let everybody know what it is. But I realized, because my wife is a person who's considerate of other people's emotions and feelings, how things sound, how things may come off. And I find myself now being in situations where the old me would have just been like, nah, I don't want that. Nah, I don't like that. And I find myself thinking, wait, how would my wife consider this person? And I find me being able to tap into a new level of compassion, because it's like, dang, I can actually now realize me saying and having an opinion is important. It's not ultimately more important than how this person may feel about something. And if I'm loving and serving this person, I can say, okay, for the sake of loving you well, maybe what I want and desire or want to say right now isn't really loving you in the effective way where I'm valuing what you feel. So that's just the way I think about it as well.
Nah, that's some heat, bro.
Do we have some time for questions?
I think
we're taking questions from the chat as well. So if y'all got questions, we will run those up too. We definitely will run those up. We had
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jess.
No, I was just gonna say, like, probably one of the things we've all been talking about, I think leads to one question is, like, how would y'all define success? Like, how would you define a successful marriage?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Now that you've been in a marriage for a little bit, how do y'all define that benchmark?
Wow, that's so good. I think for me, my simple definition for success in marriage is simply just walking in how God designed it, right? And so, one of the examples of how God designed it. Let's talk specifically about our roles as a husband and wife, right? So, I know people get a little squeamy about this word, but as a wife, as wives, we are supposed to be submissive unto our husbands, of course, to Christ first, but God has given that role of leadership to our husbands, right? And so, yes, I'm able to give my opinions when it comes to decisions and point of views, but even if we disagree ultimately, if it's aligned with God's will and not sinful, then my husband makes the ultimate decision, and I have to respect that, you know. And so, if I'm out of that, if any couple is out of that order, because wives, let's be real, we be trying to it's in Genesis, we be trying to control our husbands and try to be that leader, but when that happens, we are actually out of order, and God can't bless that. God is no longer in that, right? And so that's why there's so much, maybe more arguments, dysfunction, all of that. And so that's what I feel is success in marriage, walking in the way God designed it and just being obedient to what He's called you to do. And it's not about formula. Something that works for y'all marriage may not work for us, because it's about formation, like praying to God, like what exactly do you want us to do? You know, just with every aspect of the marriage.
I'll tag something on that too. So a lot of people think when they, especially men in our culture, a lot of men hear the word submission and they kind of think that it means they're off the hook. But the crazy thing about submission is when we realize that, you know, Jesus submitted himself to the will of the Father, and that was the honor and the power, you know, was his submission. Right. So one of the things is my role as a husband is, as I'm loving my wife, one of the key components of love is sacrifice. So sacrifice, while she's submitting to me, I'm also sacrificing, constantly saying, okay, what are some things that are self-focused? What are some things that only benefit myself? What are some things that are not considering my wife? For example, this is a thing that I say all the time in business, because we're in business together. There can be times where I really genuinely want to invest in my own career a certain way, but I say, hold on. If my job as a husband is to always make sure my wife is the best she can be, is flourishing the best she can be, is shining the best she can be, even if it means that I'm not as big as her, I have to make sure that my wife looks great, because if I know to do well and don't do it, then that's sin. If I know that there's something, a way that I can love my wife, and I choose not to do it because I'm selfish or I want that glory for myself, then that's sin. And so I realized that love is that sacrifice where the husband's job is always to be self-serving, not self-serving, and literally putting his wife before himself. So.
Yeah, that's some heat, bro. That's really good. I'm gonna add on to your point, man. When I think about leadership in the household, literally, to your point, to be a Christ-like leader, you're called to daily die to yourself for the benefit of your family. Like I'm essentially supposed to be a sacrificial lamb so that my family can effectively carry out their unique and collective vision, right? And what I've even seen experientially, right? My wife has no problem submitting when I'm submitting to Christ.
Yes.
None at all, right? Because the reality is, like, if I'm being sacrificial in my leadership, she knows that her concerns, her vision, her perspective, her voice is at the highest volume, you know, at highest capacity, right? And so she literally, she has no issue with that. It's like for me, when I think about leadership and just, I guess, what that practically looks like, you've heard like in Genesis, right? It talks about like you're supposed to cultivate the garden, right? Mm-hmm. Cultivating the garden. And when I think about leadership and cultivating the garden, that means that I'm supposed to be a student of my wife, be a PhD in Jessica Stevens, to learn her fears, her goals, her concerns, her insecurities, etc. Right? Because only through me being a student of that and then me plugging into God, that's how I learn how to effectively love and lead her, right? Yeah. And when I'm doing those two things, that's the ideal leader you want, right? Because I'm leading her like Christ would, right? And so I think that cultivation, like practically living out that cultivation piece. For example, she just launched her latest book, right? As a husband, I'm so excited about it. I'm like, babe, what do you need? Oh. What financial resource do you need for marketing? Publishing, the whole nine. Let me go be on the prowl. Like, let me go get this bread so that you can create fertile soil so that she can be all that God has called her to be, right?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And so like I want my leadership should be a launching pad for her to be who God has called her to be.
So good.
That's so good, man.
Praise God.
So good.
Yes. Any last minute thoughts about that question before we jump into some questions from the audience? All right.
Jump right in.
We can jump right in.
All right. So let us look at the somebody, J. Lauren Carter. Oh, okay. So how are you navigating submission to your spouse? So this was 34 minutes ago. So I guess we did we answer that for you, J. Lauren Carter? Or do you want us to talk a little bit more about submission?
Well, that was really good, E, for sure.
Was. Let me look at something else. Another question is, let's go. I saw something. Yeah,
I saw something about submission.
Yeah, so let's talk about.
But I think we already hit on.
Yeah. Okay, here's one from.
Any other questions?
Love Soul Tree says, how do you practice patience in the areas your spouse is still growing in when they hurt or trigger you?
Ooh, that's a great question.
That's a good one.
Go ahead, babe.
You got something, Jess?
No, I don't got it.
No,
I need to answer too. Go ahead.
I will say this. Y'all, I'm like, for real, like the word contains everything. So there have been times when Evan has hurt me. There have been times when I've hurt him. And those times when Evan has hurt me, I just love reading the Bible. So when I go to Hosea, and when I go to Hosea, I'm just like, Father, you can just see the Lord's heart bleeding out. Yeah. And you can see his emotion, and you can just see the pain and the trauma. And of course, God doesn't have trauma, but you see what I'm saying? Like, Lord, you felt like this toward the Israelite people, and they did this against you, and they kept doing it over and over and over. And when I could see like the Lord's emotion in that, I felt so seen. I felt so heard, especially those times I talk about like being lonely. You feel so seen by the Lord, and that's when you can hear the Lord, and He'll give you the next steps. Whether it be just wait, I got it. Don't fear. I'll stop praying those prayers of fear, Jessica. Pray in faith. He'll lead you and guide you, and that's not a cliche. That's exactly what the Lord has done.
So true, right?
I want to add on to that. So for me, in those moments of, I guess, patience, I think about Jesus, right, and how in every engagement he had 100% grace and 100% truth, right? They say too much truth and too less of grace is condemnation. Too much grace, too less truth is compromise, right? And so for me, I try to like keep those things in balance as I'm trying to walk with her as she's going through her respective struggle. But also, I think with like a practical tool to use, think about my worst sins and how jacked up and broken I am, and then have that at the top of my mind before I engage with her, because that naturally puts me in a more humble state. And it naturally helps me extend the same grace that I know I need as they walk through that season.
Wow. Yep, exactly. Looking at ourselves and how God sees us, right, despite our mess, and how patient and loving He is. And so that's so good. So Bree is asking, as a natural leader and career woman, I feel like we could co-lead as partners. I'm struggling with the submission question to either of y'all. Do either of y'all deal with that? So, Bree, that's a good question. So for me, I help run the business with my husband. I did most. You'd say like I do most of the business stuff, right? Like the emailing, the getting the clients, consultations, all of that. And so I believe all of us on this call are naturally leaders, right? Because I feel like God has called us to lead in different capacities. So yes, my husband and I, we do co-lead. So I don't want to say that God isn't just calling the man to just lead and that's it. No, we are partners. You know, we are partners. We both co-lead in this marriage, in the business, in our ministries. And so I just know that for me, it's just an understanding that we play different roles, and that's okay, right? And that's okay. And so that doesn't mean that he's more than me. That doesn't mean that I'm less than him. And it just means that I just play a specific role in our marriage. And anything you can add on with that as well, right? That doesn't mean like you still listen to my point of views and all of that.
One of the things that I think I've learned is, as being the leader of our home, you can't be a good leader if you're not a good listener. So I've learned that the way that the world often tells us what leadership is actually warped, because the best leaders are people who are humble enough to realize that they don't know everything.
Right.
And I've learned that from a music perspective. For example, I'm an artist. My whole life, music has been my baby, but I've realized as a husband who's now married to my wife, which means I share everything with her, even my goals, dreams, aspirations, music. One of the best ways that I can actually be an effective leader is by giving her the freedom and ability to speak fully into my dream in a way that says, this is yours just as much as it's mine. And if there's something you think about it, I'm giving you permission. I'm giving you opportunity to chisel it, speak into it, direct it. And when we talk about submission, it's not one person walking over the other. And that's why what Evan said was so key. My wife has no problem submitting to me when she sees that I'm submitted to God. But when she sees that I'm not, then definitely it's not easy for either one of us, because it's like, why would I follow you? You ain't even following who you supposed to follow.
You're submitted to God, right?
Yeah, so we're both submitted. So
I know we have one more minute. I want to add one last thing. Is I love the scripture. The Lord says, "Not many of you should desire to be teachers, because you will be judged more harshly." And that is something I also think about with Evan leading, is that at the end of the day, the Lord's going to be knocking on the door and he has to be the one to answer. And so I pray over him, because I know I'm going to accountable for how our household is run, you know? And so we probably should do another talk, y'all, on submission.
Definitely.
Clearly.
For sure. We only have a few seconds, but we just want to thank you guys for hopping on, everybody that was on here. We appreciate the love. And this was not going to be the last. So make sure you guys follow all of us, TourLife_, and then you guys can leave your handles on there as well, Jess and Evan. And feel free to also comment like what topics you'd like for us to hear. The replay, I know, right? In only an hour. The replay will be available on our page. And so, we'll see you guys next time. And thank you guys so much. We love y'all. God bless.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yep.
Bye.
All right, y'all.
Bye.
Because the reality is, like, if I'm being sacrificial in my leadership, she knows that her concerns, her vision, her perspective, her voice is at the highest volume, at highest capacity, right? And so she has no issue with that. It's like, for me, when I think about leadership and just, I guess, what that practically looks like, you've heard, like, in Genesis, right? It talks about, like, you're supposed to cultivate the garden, right? Cultivating the garden, and when I think about leadership and cultivating the garden, that means that I'm supposed to be a student of my wife, be a PhD in Jessica Stevens, to learn her fears, her goals, her concerns, her insecurities, etc., right? Because only through me being a student of that, and then me plugging into God, that's how I learn how to effectively love and lead her, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm doing those two things, that's the ideal leader you want, right? Because I'm leading her like Christ would, right? And so I think that cultivation, like practically living out that cultivation piece. For example, she just launched her latest book, right? As a husband, I'm so excited about it. I'm like, babe, what do you need?
Oh.
What financial resource do you need for marketing, publishing, the whole nine? Let me go be on the prowl. Like, let me go get this bread so that you can create fertile soil so that she can be all that God has called her to be, right?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? And so like I want my leadership should be a launching pad for her to be who God has called her to be.
You did a great
So
job.
good.
That's so good, man.
Praise God.
So good.
Yes. Any last minute thoughts about that question before we jump into some questions from the audience? All right.
That was good.
Jump right in.
We can jump right in.
All right. So let us look at the somebody J. Lauren Carter. Oh, okay. So how are you navigating submission to your spouse? So this was 34 minutes ago. So I guess we did we answer that for you, J. Lauren Carter, or do you want us to talk a little bit more about submission? Well,
That was really good, E, for sure.
Was.
Man.
Let me look at something else. Another question is, let's go. I saw something. Yeah,
I saw something about submission.
Yeah. So let's talk about.
But I think we already hit on.
Yeah. Okay. Here's one from.
Any other questions?
Love Soul Tree says, "How do you practice patience in the areas your spouse is still growing in when they hurt or trigger you?"
Ooh, that's a great question.
It's a good one.
Go ahead, babe.
You got something, Jess?
No, I don't got it.
No, I just,
I need the answer too. Go ahead.
I will say this, y'all. I'm like, for real. Like, the word contains everything. So there have been times when Evan has hurt me. There have been times when I've hurt him, and those times when Evan has hurt me, it is. So I just love reading the Bible. So I go to Hosea, and when I go to Hosea, I just Father, these you can just see the Lord's heart bleeding out. And you can see his emotion, and you can just see the pain and the trauma. And of course, God doesn't have trauma, but you see what I'm saying? Like, Lord, you felt like this toward the Israelite people, and they did this against you, and they kept doing it over and over and over. And when I could see like the Lord's emotion in that, I felt so seen. I felt so heard, especially those times I talk about like being lonely. You feel so seen by the Lord, and that's when you can hear the Lord. And he'll give you the next steps, whether it be just wait, I got it. Don't fear. I'll stop praying those prayers of fear, Jessica. Pray in faith. He'll lead you and guide you. And that's not a cliche. That's exactly what the Lord has done.
So true, right?
I want to add on to that. So for me, in those moments of, I guess, patience, I think about Jesus, right? And how in every engagement he had 100% grace and 100% truth, right? They say too much truth and too less of grace is condemnation. Too much grace, too less truth is compromise, right? And so for me, I try to like keep those things in balance as I'm trying to walk with her as she's going through her respective struggle. But also, I think with like a practical tool to use, think about my worst sins and how jacked up and broken I am, and then have that at the top of my mind before I engage with her, because that naturally puts me in a more humble state. And it naturally helps me extend the same grace that I know I need as they walk through that season.
Wow. Yep, exactly. Looking at ourselves and how God sees us, right, despite our mess, and how patient and loving he is. And so that's so good. So Bree is asking, as a natural leader and career woman, I feel like we could co-lead as partners. I'm struggling with the submission question to either of y'all. Do either of y'all deal with that? So Bree, that's a good question. So for me, I help run the business with my husband. I did most, you'd say like I do most of the business stuff, right? Like the emailing, the getting the clients, consultations, all of that. And so I believe all of us on this call are naturally leaders, right? Because I feel like God has called us to lead in different capacities. So yes, my husband and I, we do co-lead. So I don't want to say that God isn't just calling the man to just lead and that's it. No, we are partners. You know, we are partners. We both co-lead in this marriage, in the business, in our ministries. And so I just know that for me, it's just an understanding that we play different roles, and that's okay, right? And that's okay. And so that doesn't mean that he's more than me. That doesn't mean that I'm less than him. And it just means that I just play a specific role in our marriage. And anything you can add on with that as well, right? That doesn't mean like you still listen to my point of views and all of that.
One of the things that I think I've learned is, as being the leader of our home, you can't be a good leader if you're not a good listener. So I've learned that the way that the world often tells us what leadership is actually warped, because the best leaders are people who are humble enough to realize that they don't know everything.
Right.
And I've learned that from a music perspective. For example, I'm an artist. My whole life, music has been my baby, but I've realized as a husband who's now married to my wife, which means I share everything with her, even my goals, dreams, aspirations, music. One of the best ways that I can actually be an effective leader is by giving her the freedom and ability to speak fully into my dream in a way that says, this is yours just as much as it's mine. And if there's something you think about it, I'm giving you permission. I'm giving you opportunity to chisel it, speak into it, direct it. And when we talk about submission, it's not one person walking over the other. And that's why what Evan said was so key. My wife has no problem submitting to me when she sees that I'm submitted to God. But when she sees that I'm not, then definitely it's not easy for either one of us, because it's like, why would I follow you? You ain't even following who you supposed to follow.
You're
So
submitted to God, right?
Yeah, so we're both submitted. So
I know we have one more minute. I want to add one last thing. Is I love the scripture when the Lord says, "Not many of you should desire to be teachers, because you will be judged more harshly." And that is something I also think about with Evan leading, is at the end of the day, the Lord's going to be knocking on the door and he has to be the one to answer. And so I pray over him, because I know I'm going to account for how our household is run, you know? And so we probably should do another talk, y'all, on submission.
Definitely.
Clearly.
For sure. We only have a few seconds, but we just want to thank you guys for hopping on, everybody that was on here. We appreciate the love. And this was not going to be the last. So make sure you guys follow all of us, tourlife_, and then you guys can leave your handles on there as well, Jess and Evan. And feel free to also comment like what topics you'd like for us to hear. The replay, I know, right? In only an hour. The replay will be available on our page. And so, we'll see you guys next time. And thank you guys so much. We love y'all. God bless.
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yep.
Bye.
All right, y'all.
Bye.